Once I'm done watching a new movie or even an older movie like this, it's actually not too long before I'm ready to review them. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel and another installment of my SpongeBob SquarePants review series. Today, we're talking about the very first SpongeBob film, the SpongeBob SquarePants Movie. I already reviewed the original run of the TV series, which was everything up until this movie, and I'll leave a link in the description in case you missed it, and I'll have a playlist that includes that as well as all three movies once I get each review out. But in the meantime, let me know your thoughts on the SpongeBob SquarePants Movie in the comments below if you've seen it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there and growing the community. And if you are new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about the SpongeBob SquarePants Movie. This focuses on SpongeBob and his friend Patrick, who, after King Neptune's crown is stolen, go on a quest where they have 6 days to retrieve it. On the way, SpongeBob and Patrick defeat many evildoers using their brains and bronzes. While this is happening, someone is taking over Bikini Bottom, and SpongeBob and Patrick must defeat this mastermind. This is directed by series creator Stephen Hillenburg, who also co-wrote the screenplay with 5 other writers from the show: Derek Dryman, Kent Osborne, Aaron Springer, Paul Tibbitt, who would go on to direct the second film, and Tim Hill, who'd go on to write and direct the third film. And while normally 6 screenwriters on one movie would signal something severely wrong with it, in this case it's actually normal given the nature of how the show was written. Similar to the show's first 3 seasons, and what I assume might still be the case to this day, I'm not sure, but the film wasn't given a traditional script. Instead, some rough animation was drawn on post-it notes, which would then get further visualized by storyboard artists, and that's when all the dialogue and the jokes were added in. It worked wonders for the show, and I'm happy to say that the magic was once again recreated for this movie. And in a way, it does feel like a little bit of an extended episode of the show, but on a much grander scale, containing much of the usual zaniness and style of humor seen all throughout the show, but all done in some really stunning animation that's some of the best I've seen from anything SpongeBob related. We get the most bizarre, random throwaway lines that wind up being some of the film's best moments, along with extreme close-ups of characters where it emphasizes some comically gross quality about them, as well as incorporating elements of live action. We'll have an opening with live-action pirates on their way to see the movie, a scene taking place in a live-action gift shop, as well as most notably, a cameo by David Hasselhoff as himself, which gave him a newfound audience afterwards. In fact, the film does include a number of big-name stars in supporting roles, which was something Hillenburg was against while he was on board with the show, but decided to do here since he wanted the series, at least what he thought was going to happen at the time, to go out with a bang. Besides Hasselhoff, you have Jeffrey Tambor voicing King Neptune, Scarlett Johansson as his daughter Mindy, and Alec Baldwin as Dennis, a hitman hired to get rid of SpongeBob and Patrick while out on their quest. All of whom were fun in their respective roles. Unlike an episode of the show, which typically revolved around some random misadventure of SpongeBob and his friends, or a routine task that winds up being taken to some extreme heights, this sees SpongeBob and Patrick on what's one of the most common storytelling tropes, which is the hero's journey. They go on an adventure, they have to solve a crisis, and then come home changed. And as expected, this was the boldest the show ever went, and Hillenburg was very careful in making sure it was something that really worked, as he was skeptical about a SpongeBob movie for a few years after he was initially approached. He was always afraid of trying to take a SpongeBob story that required some sort of adventure, and it would be stretched out way longer than it should have been. And not to make constant comparisons to the show or anything, but it was something I did note a bit in the final season of his time on the show, where we got a number of full-length 24-minute episodes, and while they were fine for what they were, I did feel they were based around concepts that were stretched out a little longer than they should have been, and weren't up to the usual quality we were used to at that time. But I was happy to see Hillenburg was a lot more careful when crafting the story for this. Here, SpongeBob's hero journey centered around him trying to prove something that has always been something of an anomaly throughout the show. Even though he's technically a young adult, he always saw the world with this optimistic naivete and childlike innocence, and because he shared qualities both kids and adults could easily relate to, that's what helped make the show resonate with all audiences. But while SpongeBob can be responsible, his childlike qualities can be the most prominent part of his personality, and part of his quest involves proving to everyone that he's not a kid but a man, which is a recurring exchange he'll have with multiple characters. In the beginning, we find out his boss, Mr. Krabs, is opening up a second location of his successful restaurant, the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob thinks he's going to get the job of manager there, only for the job to go to his co-worker Squidward, and Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob that he's still just a child and that's why he didn't get the job. And that's a big part of what motivates him to want to take on this quest to get the crown, on top of the fact that he doesn't want to see anything happen to Mr. Krabs, who's wrongly accused of stealing it after being framed by his rival Plankton. And a lot of the film's fun revolves around SpongeBob and Patrick encountering various obstacles that go with the hero's journey, though handling each situation with the same goofy optimism that they'd handle everyday tasks, which is what makes this so brilliant. You'd have really high-stakes moments that were pretty exciting, yet they were infused with tons of hilarious exchanges thanks to the way in which SpongeBob and Patrick handle them. For example, one of the hands-down funniest moments for me was early on when the two of them initially are driving a car shaped like a Krabby Patty, and they encounter two gas station attendants who mercilessly make fun of them, and they state how they wouldn't last 10 seconds on their own. So when the car gets stolen a mere 12 seconds later, SpongeBob and Patrick attempt to rub it in the attendants' faces as if they proved them wrong. And while they technically did, it's still really pathetic, but they don't even care. And that's how they approach literally everything. And that's what's made both the show, and this movie as an extension, so hilarious from start to finish. As a longtime fan of the show, I have next to no issues with this movie, other than maybe a small gap in logic regarding the material surrounding Neptune and Mindy, that I can somewhat understand, but I still didn't think was totally thought through. Like, Mindy seems to be fully aware of what's really going on behind the scenes with Plankton, but the way she addresses it with Neptune didn't make total sense to me, to be honest. But it's really a minor nitpick. The only other thing I'd say, though, is that this may sound obvious, but if you're not a fan of the show to begin with, you'll still enjoy it, but maybe just not to the extent that fans of the show will. Like, you'll still get it for the most part, but some of the dynamics among the characters you'll appreciate a little more if you're already familiar with the show. Mainly because of outside SpongeBob, Patrick, Plankton, and to an extent Mr. Krabs, most of the show's regular characters are relegated to very minor roles, some of whom only have a couple of lines of dialogue. Like, you can still appreciate how much of a curmudgeon Squidward is, with his few scenes highlighting his indifference towards customers and only caring about himself, but it's still more of a one-note role compared to how enjoyable he is on the show. Meanwhile, excellent supporting characters on the show like Sandy and Mrs. Puff have only a handful of lines, while characters like the superheroes Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy aren't even seen. And on its own, it might not be that big of a deal, as this really is SpongeBob and Patrick's movie, and while the show did continue on after this, kind of unfortunately, depending on who you ask, it's disappointing considering this was originally meant to serve as a finale for the show, and we didn't get any sort of nice closure for these other characters as we did for SpongeBob, Patrick, and some of the others. And for those of you who never saw the show before this, and this is your very first exposure to SpongeBob, you might be a little overwhelmed by who some of these other random characters were, but I still think you'll mostly appreciate this. I remember how the great Roger Ebert gave this a pretty glowing review at the time, despite confessing to not having watched much of the show and not fully understanding everything, yet he still managed to appreciate it on its own. So, if he could understand it, I think those who also haven't seen the show at all could understand it too. This is by far one of the greatest adventures of SpongeBob between the show and the movies. It's filled with all the goofy, bizarre humor that made the show so endearing after all these years, and managed to infuse it with an epic adventure that also gave way for some great character development for one of TV's greatest characters. If you haven't seen the show before seeing this, you probably won't enjoy it as much as longtime fans would, but there's still plenty to appreciate, and I couldn't recommend it enough. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie gets a 9.5 out of 10. Stay tuned, next up I'll have a review of the second movie, Sponge Out of Water, and in the meantime, let me know, did you see the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you find it as good as the show? Do you still watch it to this day? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.